after those presentations, I've never had a parent that's like, I don't get this. This doesn't make sense, because they're always like, they're so thankful. And they're like, wow, I wish this would have been around when I was a teen. This matters so much. It's so important. I wish you were in every school. So they sense the importance of it, but they also kind of just want me to do it.
Hi, everyone. I am Michelle Melville-Kashan. I'm the Community and Content Director here at Sexual Health Alliance. And today I am with Sigga Dögg. Sigga Dögg is one of our presenters for our cross-cultural event happening in March 2025. Welcome, Sigga Dögg.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks for being with us today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I am an Icelandic sex educator, sexologist, and author. And what I mostly do is lecture to teens and parents, and then to kind of stretch out the way of giving out, okay, so let me rephrase that. So when I started out lecturing, I discovered there wasn't a whole lot of material, especially in Icelandic, and I learned sexology in Australia, where they have a big kind of cultural heritage of storytelling, which is the same as us Icelanders. We have a big cultural storytelling heritage. So I started writing these kind of sex education novels to give teens kind of a script and be able to kind of see themselves from a different point of view, rather than it being like exciting or trying to be enticing or thrilling or whatever. I wanted them to really engage in those kinds of deep dive conversations around sexual health and sexual matters. So that's been one of my key points in sex education. And only recently have I gone into sex education for adults. So I've been doing that for the past 2 years as well. So that's kind of me. And one thing I do on the side to kind of keep it alive and spicy is I do stand-up. I do really nitty gritty, dirty stand-up.
That is so cool. I love that. So can you tell us, what are some of the challenges with teaching sex education to teens in Iceland?
Okay, so I mean, funding it's not federal funding. So usually it's paid for by individual schools, sometimes by the school district, sometimes by parents, sometimes even by like student associations.
Mhm.
And a single principal can have like a no, like he can have a say so if you're allowed to go into that school or not. Um, but I think the conversation in Iceland is really violence heavy. So it's really hard to maintain a sex positive advocacy for pleasure in an environment that's really like protect the women, protect them from violence, really focus on patriarchy. And so kind of just like trying to get a wedge in can be hard, because if you're not talking about violence or porn, they're kind of like, what's the point?
Oh, okay, I see. So in Iceland, the culture is more, the sex education is preventing violence instead of teaching
Yep,
pleasure.
right.
Oh,
Well, I've been changing that for 15 years though.
yes, yes. And we need that everywhere around the world.
Hmm.
So can you tell me a little bit about your book?
Okay, so I've written and published 7 books. I'm writing my 8th as we speak. And the focus is always on kind of being your own agent. So having this sexual agency, being a woman in every kind of aspect. So it's always like a kind of female forward, because I mean, I identify as a woman and I use the pronouns she, her. So
Mhm.
that's always kind of been my focus, because of the way feminism is here in Iceland. I think it's really important, but they are always but I'm really good at writing in gender neutral as well, to be very inclusive, because our language does not allow neutrality at all. So you have to be inventive of new words and new ways of using the language. And I've noticed what you guys have been talking about, what you have been talking about in America, for example. And it's quite different over here, because like the entire structure of every sentence changes according to gender. And we don't,
Oh,
yeah. So that's been kind of one of the things, while I write from a female perspective, I've always had that as the forefront of when I'm writing about pleasure or writing about the gender politics or just like being alive as a person, and always challenging those concepts that we have of culture and why we think this is like a rule, like a rule that we have to abide by. So I'm trying to embolden my readers to ask, why does it have to be this way? Can I choose a path for myself? So it's like a lot of why, where did this come from? And I want that to start really early. So I write about a lot of taboo concepts as well. So like I wrote a children's book about divorce and going through a divorce from the from the viewpoint of children and how they navigate and how they understand themselves within that context. So it's kind of just like, if I see that there's nothing been written in my language, because we're a small nation, I feel like I have a call of action then. It's like, nothing's been written about this, so let me go there.
Yeah, that's amazing. So when you do sex education, do you usually teach in groups, like large settings, like large groups of like 100 or more students, or do you do small groups, individual sex education? What's your process?
So I usually do small groups because from what I've read, the research doesn't bring as much benefit to the students if it's a big group. So I think for older teens, bigger groups work better. So for like what we have here is an equivalent to your high school. So there I may have big groups and I do anonymous questions, but with teens, let's say from maybe like 5th grade until the 10th. So that's like 11-year-old until like 15, 16, then I have a cap of 30 students per class, because I need to be able to, and I always tell the teachers this, and the teachers always stay for the lecture as well. So I always tell them I need to be able to make eye contact with every student, and if I can't do that, the group's too big.
I love that philosophy. I think that's great.
It's a rule of thumb. So, and I always tell the teachers that the children that I can't make eye contact with are the ones that I'm worried about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how do the children usually react to your sex education lessons? Do they ask a lot of questions? Are they kind of shy? What's your response?
It's very diverse. Like every group is its own culture. So you never know what you're going into until the lecture really is like 15 minutes into it.
Yeah.
But because I'm not afraid of using the language, and that's always been at my forefront. So like I say clit and I say, sperm and penis, or I ask them like, what are the words that you guys use? These are the words that I use, but you might be using different words. So I'm really unafraid of them, and I'm unafraid to challenge them and to let them laugh. So we kind of like break the ice within 5 minutes, because they're like, okay, she's very straightforward. She is funny. And, so it kind of always puts them at ease. And we're actually going to be talking about sex. We're not going to be talking around it. We're going into the heart of it. So I might open up, like if I have a class of boys that are a bit of rowdy and the teachers have like warned me, they're like, might have to show some pupils out. They might distract or whatever, then I make sure I hit really hard within the first minute. I'm like, okay, so let's talk about the sperm and why it hurts to get it into the eye, if that's something you're interested in. If not, we can talk about penis size, but we'll also take a look at some vulvas. So are you ready? And it'll shut them up.
Yeah,
like, for sure.
Yeah, and I bet your background in stand-up comedy really comes in handy here, because you can break the ice by being funny and telling jokes, and the kids probably really love that.
Well, yeah, and I told them we can joke about sex, and we need to be able to joke about sex without degrading somebody or belittling somebody, because if your sex doesn't have a lot of humor, it's hard to keep the passion and play alive. So I always tell them it's very essential to sex to be able to laugh about yourself and about what happens and your thoughts. And, so if humor isn't a part of it, you're losing a big part of it, because that's one of the first things I always ask the kids. I said, why do you think we have sex? And they often ask, tell me that's for procreation. And it's like, no, it's for play and pleasure. And they're like, wait, what? I'm like, yeah. So if this is not a part of your play, because humor is a part of most people's play at some point or another. So I think that has been, that focus on play and curiosity has made me very successful within teens and younger adults. But very hated sometimes among the professional community who feels that I am downgrading the holiness and sanctity of sex, that I'm downgrading violence or the gender politics, that I'm not being respectful, that it's all la-di-da and everybody can just go and have sex with anybody all the time. So that's how I sometimes get portrayed, as like the porn lady. That's what I've been called in the media.
Yeah. So are there like a lot of people doing work in sexual health in Iceland, or is it a pretty small community of people doing the work there?
Well, we are a very small community of people, but there are a lot of teachers who teach sex ed, but it's
Mhm.
like all over the place. So we don't really know what they're teaching, how they're teaching it, and they're not getting support, and it's nothing in their curriculum when they're learning to be a teacher that helps them out with that. So it's anyone's game really, and it's really all over the place. So I had a very respected, or a woman who was very respected, who was lecturing, and she comes from the kind of gender politics standpoint, and she had a lecture before me, and she was telling the boys, like, if you look at a girl's butt, that's disrespectful, and that might incite violence in you. And I was like, what is happening? Because this is a well-educated, very smart woman. I'm like, how can you say that to teens? That's very irresponsible and just wrong.
Yeah. And like, what is the parents' reaction to your sex education? Like, does it vary? Are they happy that you're having the conversation so they don't really have to do it? Or are they like, we don't want you talking about this in schools? Like, what kind of reaction do you get from parents?
Well, I usually say if a parent has strong feelings about my lectures, that means that they've never sat through one. So
Mm.
I always tell schools that it's really important that we have something for the parents as well, or else this is kind of meaningless. This is like doing it half-assed. So we need to engage the parents as well. And once the parents, because they sit through the same slides as their teens, and I tell them exactly what was the reaction with their teens within the class, what they were asking. And I've never had a parent after those presentations, I've never had a parent that's like, I don't get this. This doesn't make sense, because they're always like, they're so thankful. And they're like, wow, I wish this would have been around when I was a teen. This matters so much. It's so important. I wish you were in every school. So they sense the importance of it, but they also kind of just want me to do it.
Yeah.
So
I mean, and that is amazing feedback to get,
it
like
is.
compliment could you get than like, I wish I had that, as a young person. That's amazing.
Well, that's what I tell them as well. I'm like, that's why I went into this, because this is what I would have wanted. And when I realized that it still hadn't been fixed when I was an adult, then that's what you go and do.
Yeah. So in general, would you say that Iceland is like more conservative than the United States, less conservative, about the same? What do you think?
No, I think definitely less conservative, because I mean, divorces are very common here. So is having a child out of wedlock, and just like not getting married, not even cohabitating. Having multiple partners, having had the same partner as your friend, casual sex, all these kinds of things, getting an STD or STI. No, I'd say we're quite liberal here. We are. And I mean, abortion is free and very easy, accessible.
Wow, I didn't know that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And birth control and Plan B is relatively easily accessible. It could be easier. Like some states in the US do it better than us. But and in general, there is, I would say, like a kind of a laid back atmosphere, but we've felt the backlash that has been happening. And definitely me as an independent educator, like the schools just went into kind of lockdown with their funding, and they're really reserved and have been for the last 2 years. So what we're seeing with the LGBTQIA, what's happening there is definitely affecting how we talk about sex and gender. And what's actually saddened me here is where they go into the queer politics, and they're always like washing their hands off sex education. They're like, no, 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 we're talking about queer stuff. We're not talking about sex education. I'm like, well, you can't have one without the other. Like, they go together. They're like peanut butter and jelly. It's like you can't have just one. So that really saddened me that they just like, no, 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 we don't do sex education at all. We won't touch it. And I'm like, that's doing a really disservice to your community, because I would never say that about sex education. No, we don't talk about queer matters at all, you know? So I was saddened by that. So that's been kind of what's been going on for the past couple of years here.
Yeah, and what do you think is behind that? Do you think it's the influence of like what's happening in the US, or do you think, I don't know, and I have another question for you too, and maybe this ties together. I know like in the USA, a lot of our public policy is influenced by religion, by conservative Christians, especially in like the southern states and certain parts of the US. Like, do you have like a religious influence in Iceland that like influences public policy?
And not really. This is to do with funding.
Hmm.
This has to do with funding and the way we view feminism here. So this has to do with the liberal sex acts and going into kink and talking about that. And there's a strong tie, obviously, between the queer community and offensive sex acts, if you will, with like, you know, like anal sex, with kink, with play, with various kinds of things that they do not want you to get into. So I got hauled into the media for saying on Instagram that in my last class for 15-year-olds, we talked about choking because it's a popular thing to do, and I wanted to address it, health hazards, and just explain how it worked, why people were doing it, and the risks involved.
Hmm.
And it blew into such a huge thing here, and it really divided people. It was in all the media, and it was like on the main news. We had to do like an interview, and I had to answer to a lot of people for that, and to schools as well and stuff. But we really got into it, and there you could see that the Icelandic nation, because they were divided, they were kind of like, we wish we wouldn't have to talk about this. We don't want to talk about these kinds of things. These kinds of sex acts are perverted. This is all due to porn, blah, blah, blah. But also they were like, but we're also very thankful that you're doing the conversation that we really don't want to talk about. So we're glad that you're there and that somebody's talking to the kids. But at the same time, we're really scared and we're really afraid for our children. Like, what is their world? And then it always goes back into porn. Trying to explain that to an adult who has a really fixed mindset of protecting women, it's almost impossible. So it's not Christianity, it's funding. It's like federal funding and how it's funneled through. And I understand, of course, the Queer Association of Iceland doesn't want to lose their funding. I don't want them to. So I understand that they did it, and I didn't say anything publicly about it. But I was so saddened in my heart because I was like, hey, come on, we stick together. I support you, but you also support me. Let's not do this.
Right, right. I mean, it just makes sense for a collaboration to happen naturally.
Yeah. I did a TV show for one of the television stations here, and we went and visited Erica Lust. So we visited her offices, and we did a huge long interview with her, and it was so interesting when that was because that went into the media. They're like, oh my god, they visited this porn woman, and there was like a sound of silence. I was like, okay, nobody wants to touch that because they're not sure what kind of hell it will raise, and nobody wants to be the prude. But I heard from like, there were some closed Facebook groups of certain kind of like a feminist orientation, I will say, that were livid. And they were like, and this is shown on TV, and they feel that this is okay. And, it's so irresponsible even, and like teens can access this. And I was like, we can't win. Like, she's Swedish. She's Swedish.
Wow. And that's just so surprising to me that like feminist groups are so anti even ethical porn. Like, wow, that's
well there after the choking incident, there was a rift. I will say this. There was a big rift in the older versus the younger. So the younger were kind of like, no, we need to talk about this. This is happening. And it isn't actually as dangerous as you think it is. And the older were like, porn is violence. This is a part of porn. We say no. So there were a lot of groups that kind of split away from the bigger groups, formed their own. And I got a lot of messages saying that, like, this was a really difficult times and people are having really difficult conversations because they were like, okay, I feel you're shaming me, you're kink shaming me, and you don't want to see me as a whole individual. And now you're saying I'm less of a feminist because I like so and so or this and this.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really, I think it was a catalyst for a change. But like, change takes a long time. And now people are afraid because there is this backlash and they're afraid to just like show their true faces because they never know who they're encountering or, or what consequences what they say might have, even though we have all these laws in place. You're never 100% safe.
Yeah. And so I'm wondering, in Iceland, is there any type of like standard sex education, like for all of the schools, like the public schools, like, teaching anatomy or like anything? Like, is there anything out there or is it all just a free for all?
No, there kind of is, but it's very open to interpretation. And it's very, I mean, my kids have gone to 2 schools, so I've seen how different those schools teach and what they teach and how they approach it. And I mean, going through the entire country, it seems we have kind of just allocated it to the nurses, and they're supposed to say something in the 6th grade about puberty, and then again in the 9th grade about STIs. And that is basically it.
And that's it. Oh my gosh.
I mean, there is stuff. There are textbooks. There are teachers, like very enthusiastic teachers who will put extra classes in. But then you have teachers who hate this subject, don't want to have anything to do with it. And it's like the least popular subject often to teach. So it falls on somebody who like threw the short end of the straw. And then they're doing bare minimum, like bare minimum.
Yeah.
And you never know. It's different with every school. So that's why I always start by asking, like, what have you done? What have you guys been talking about?
Yeah.
And guys in Icelandic is, you don't use guys. It's another word. For my English, I use guys a lot, but I know that I need to change this.
Right. I do the same thing. And like, it's just conscious changing of your language. Like it's hard to do, but yeah, it's something I work on too. So what is one thing you'd want our audience to know about either the state of sexual health or sex education in Iceland? Like one takeaway for them.
Okay. I would want them to know that our teens are very vocal, strong-willed, they are curious and unbashful, and I love that about them. The education system does not love that about them, but I do. So they will get up in your face. Like I'll meet them on the street and they're like, can we do a TikTok with you? Can we take a photo? Oh my God, I loved what you said about the condom and and they are so free in a way, which I love.
Oh, I love that. That is really cool. All right. So if people want to know more about you before they come to our event, where can they find you?
I am on social media, Facebook and Instagram. I'm not really following my LinkedIn. And I have a website, but like most of the stuff I do is in Icelandic. So just use that translation button. And I'm really personal on my social media usually. So you can get to know quite a bit of me. And I often get in trouble for what I share on social media. But a takeaway for the audience, always challenge them when they take down your photos, because it does work to challenge them. I have often won my case.
Oh, yeah, that's a great tip. I love that. We know there's lots of censorship happening, especially right now, and especially in the US. I know it's happening all over. Anything related to sex, sexual health, sexuality, censorship is just taking over right now. All right, everyone. Well, if you want to hear more from Sigga Dögg, please come to our event, Cross-Cultural Perspectives on Sexual Health, happening March 15th and 16th, 2025. This is an online event, so it's very accessible. We are going to have presenters from all over the world talking about sex education, sexual health. So it's going to be amazing. I'm really excited for this event. I think it's going to be great. You can get tickets online at our website at sexualhealthalliance.com. I'll also have the link in the description below. Yeah, if you love this video, you love this content, please like this video, subscribe to our channel for more. I do these interviews for every event that we have. We get to talk and have some one-on-one time with our presenters, and it's amazing. Anything else you want to add before we go?
I don't think so. I think I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for being with us, and thank you all for watching. Have a great day.